Welcome back to the deep dive. You know how it is. Want to stay informed, be ready for anything, but who's got time to read a whole library? Right? That's where we
Oh,
come in.
right.
Today, we're slapping on those latex gloves, diving deep into first aid.
Oh, this is good. Using those latest guidelines
Yeah,
too.
I'd have them.
And we're not just talking like basic bandages and ice packs here.
Nope.
This is about, understanding the why, the core stuff behind those actions we can all take when it matters most.
You know, one thing that really struck me from these guidelines,
Yeah.
they define first aid not as being like a medical genius,
Right.
but as that initial response, the thing you do that can stabilize someone until, the real pros show up. It's about being the chain, not the
Mm,
bystander.
exactly. Taking action, and those actions, they're guided by what the guidelines call the 3 Ps:
Okay, I've heard of this.
protect, preserve, promote.
Hit me with it.
Protect the person from, further harm, get them out of traffic, that kind of thing. Then you focus on preserving life, airway, breathing, circulation, the essentials.
Got it.
And finally, do what you can to promote their recovery, whether that's keeping them warm or just, offering a reassuring word.
So it's like having a mental checklist in those high pressure moments.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say someone's choking.
Oh, scary.
We've all seen it in the movies, right? But this source, it lays out the actual steps, the Heimlich, encouraging coughing, and even, as a last resort, hitting them between the shoulder blades.
It's one of those things you hope you never need, but
Right. But in a crisis, you're going to be glad you know it.
absolutely. And, sometimes those crises involve water. Drowning, it's a terrifying thought.
Oh, absolutely.
But did you know you can actually start artificial respiration even when the person's still in the water?
Seriously, I had no idea. See, this is what I love about these deep dives, always learning something new.
That's right. It's about empowering you to act,
Yeah.
you know. And that kind of brings us to another big thing in first aid, recognizing the signs of shock. Now, most people, when they hear shock, they think of it as an emotional response.
Right, like, I'm shocked by this shockingly good podcast.
Exactly. But medically speaking, shock, it's serious, potentially life-threatening. The source really stresses that it's not just feeling shocked, it's about recognizing the physical signs. Rapid breathing, weak pulse, unusual behavior, and knowing that those signs mean you got to act fast.
And while we're on the subject of needing to act fast, we can't forget about strokes.
Absolutely.
This source, it really breaks it down, makes it easier to understand what's going on in those moments and how crucial it is to recognize the signs.
Yeah, and it's not always as dramatic as we see on TV. It's about being alert to those, more subtle signs, like sudden weakness on one side of the body, or their face might droop. Maybe they're having trouble speaking. Every second counts, and being able to think fast, that can make a world of difference.
The source even takes us inside a well-stocked first aid kit. And guess what? It's not just bandages and antiseptic wipes.
It's like a toolbox for emergencies.
Although those are still important.
Oh, for sure. But you want absorbent dressings, gauze pads, antibiotic ointment, roller bandages, even a breathing barrier, for CPR, and you can't forget a good pair of scissors.
Right. Essential.
Absolutely.
It really makes you think, how important is it to actually have one of these kits ready to go, not just assume you'll figure it out if something happens.
Because when that adrenaline's pumping.
Right. You don't want to be caught off guard.
Exactly. And speaking of being prepared, the source really digs into the why behind first aid.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is first aid so important? I mean, what makes it more than just good to know information?
Think about it this way. Those minutes before professional help arrives, they could be the difference between a positive outcome and a tragedy. Your actions, even seemingly small ones, can literally mean the difference between life and death. It's about taking control of the situation, buying precious time.
It's like they say knowledge is power, but in this case, it's like potentially life-saving power.
Right.
And speaking of life-saving, the source gets into those golden rules of first aid, those guiding principles for high-pressure moments.
Yeah, and these rules, they're not about just memorizing a bunch of steps. It's more about the mindset you need to actually be effective.
Okay, I like that. So give me the top three.
All right, rule number 1, and this might seem obvious, but it's huge. Stay calm.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The source really emphasizes that, when things go south, it's easy to panic. But thinking clearly is so key.
It's like, when they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask first before helping others on a plane?
Yeah,
You got to be grounded to be helpful.
exactly. All right, rule number 2. If someone's not breathing, Artificial respiration is top priority.
Okay.
Every second without oxygen, it increases the risk of brain damage, all sorts of complications, so knowing how to give those breaths is paramount.
Got it. Serious stuff. So what's number 3?
Stopping bleeding. The source is super clear about that. Controlling blood loss quickly, efficiently, that's the name of the game.
Right.
Whether it's a small cut or a big wound, knowing how to apply pressure, elevate the injury, use bandages the right way, those skills, they can be life-saving.
So it's like all these rules, they're about taking control, prioritizing those vital actions, having a plan, even when it feels like everything's falling apart.
You got it. And that kind of takes us to another critical point where the source, it gets into specific emergency scenarios, you know, gives us practical, actionable advice for dealing with all kinds of situations.
Okay, now we're talking. Give me the specifics. What kind of scenarios are we talking about here?
Well, for one, it lays out this clear action plan for asphyxia. Remember those 3 Ps we talked about?
Yep.
Protect, preserve, promote.
They're huge here.
Asphyxia, that's basically when someone's not getting enough oxygen, right? Could be choking, something blocking their airway. It's like their body's screaming, help, I need to breathe. Exactly. And the source, it really emphasizes not just knowing the steps, like, the Heimlich, which we mentioned, but understanding why they work. For example, did you know that the Heimlich works because it suddenly compresses the abdomen, forcing air up from the lungs, hopefully dislodging whatever's stuck?
I've always just kind of thought of it as do this, then do that, but getting the mechanics of it makes it so much clearer.
Right. And that understanding, it
Mhm.
can give you so much confidence in a crisis.
Yeah.
The source also gets into another scenario we talked about briefly, drowning. Now, the ideal scenario is always prevention, swimming with a buddy, being aware of water conditions.
Right, right.
But accidents happen.
Drowning, it's every parent's nightmare.
It is, and it can happen so fast, so silently. But here's something crucial the source points out. Even when the person is still in the water, you might be able to start artificial respiration.
Wait, really? I always thought you had to, get them out of the water first.
It's a common misconception, and it can cost precious time. The source emphasizes that if it's safe to reach them in the water and they're not breathing, starting rescue breaths right away can be crucial. Of course, once they're safely out of the water, the priority shifts to clearing the airway, performing CPR if needed.
Wow, that's like a game changer. Really shows how every second counts.
No.
And it's not just about knowing what to do, it's about being able to, act quickly and decisively.
Absolutely. And speaking to acting fast, the source also covers another condition that needs a cool head and a clear plan. Shock.
Right, right.
As we said before, shock, it's way more than just an emotional response. It's a serious medical condition. It can be triggered by all sorts of things, from severe bleeding and allergic reactions to burns, even heart attacks.
And recognizing those signs early is key, right?
Wow.
Rapid breathing, weak pulse, pale skin, those are the big ones.
You got it. Don't forget about changes in behavior, too, like confusion, or if they're unusually agitated. The source stresses that even if you're not totally sure if someone's in shock, it's always best to err on the side of caution. Call for help right away.
It's better to be safe than sorry, for sure, especially when it could be life-threatening. So what can you do while you're waiting for the paramedics?
Well, the source recommends some simple but effective steps. Help them lie down, elevate their legs if you can, keep them warm and comfortable.
Makes sense.
Oh, and unless they're choking or struggling to breathe, avoid giving them anything to eat or drink.
Makes sense. Got to keep their system stable. So are there any other conditions that can kind of look like other more serious problems?
The source does talk about fainting. It's usually not life-threatening, but it can be pretty alarming if you don't know what to do.
Yeah, fainting. It's kind of like shock's less intense cousin, right?
In a way, yeah. It's usually a temporary drop in blood flow to the brain, often triggered by things like dehydration, standing up too fast, even a sudden scare.
Right.
The source points out that it's usually harmless and clears up pretty quickly, but it's still good to understand why someone might suddenly collapse and what to do.
Okay, so what do you do if someone faints? Do you just fan them with a newspaper and wait for them to come around?
The newspaper fanning, that's optional. But seriously, the source recommends helping them lie down, elevate their legs if you can. Again, it helps get the blood flowing back to the brain.
And I'm guessing offering them a stiff drink is probably not the way to go.
Definitely not cocktail hour. The source is clear about that. No food or drink until they're fully alert. And of course, if they don't come around pretty quickly or if they seem injured at all, call for medical help immediately.
Always good to be prepared, just in case. And speaking of just in case scenarios, the source doesn't shy away from strokes. A condition that needs immediate medical attention.
Yeah, strokes, those are definitely moments where you don't want to, like, second guess yourself, right?
Ah.
Just call 911, get help on the way. Absolutely no hesitation. And yeah, most people get that a stroke is serious, a real medical emergency. But the source points out that a lot of folks, they don't always recognize those early warning signs, the ones that aren't as obvious.
Right, right.
That's why it's so crucial to be able to spot those red flags and get moving. Understand how important it is to act fast.
I've always heard that saying, time is brain, when it comes to strokes. It kind of drives home how urgent it is.
Exactly. Every minute matters. We're talking brain cells here, they're at risk. That's
Right.
why this source, it goes deeper than just saying, sudden weakness or numbness. It talks about how those things often only affect one side of the body.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like you might see someone's face drooping, but it's just on one side.
Hmm.
Or they might have weakness, numbness in one arm, but the other one's totally fine.
And it's not always just like the physical stuff, right? I think the source mentioned problems with speech too.
You got it. Someone having a stroke, they might suddenly have trouble speaking clearly or understanding what you're saying.
Oh,
Their words might sound jumbled or slurred. Think about it. If you could even imagine trying to speak when your brain's struggling to make those connections.
Ah.
It's like communication breakdown at the most basic level.
It's like the brain's wiring gets, I don't know, crossed and the signals get all messed up.
Exactly. And the scary thing is, these symptoms, they can hit super fast. 1 minute, someone's totally fine, chatting away, and the next, bam, they're having these serious problems.
So let's say someone is showing these signs. What does the source say to do?
Don't wait. Don't try to figure it out yourself. Just call for help, 911, immediately. Every second counts. While you're waiting for the paramedics, the source recommends a few things. Help the person get comfortable, maybe lying down with their head and shoulders a bit raised. Loosen any tight clothing, keep them calm, reassure them.
Okay, got it. And I'm guessing this is not the time to offer a glass of water or anything, right?
Are right on the money. The source is super clear on that: no food or drinks. Swallowing can be tough, and you don't want to risk them choking or having other problems.
Makes sense. It's amazing, how much goes into handling emergencies. Even the little things can be important. Makes you really appreciate the people in the medical field dealing with this kind of stuff all the time.
For sure, for sure. And we've focused a lot on like the actual knowledge of first aid, but this deep dive also highlighted something else important: having the right tools, namely a well-stocked first aid kit.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Not just something you shove in the back of the cupboard and forget about. This deep dive made me realize I need to check mine, make sure it's still good to go.
It's a good reminder for everyone, for sure. And thankfully, the source gave us a whole checklist of what to include. You've got your bandages, different types and sizes, antiseptic wipes, antibiotic ointment, gauze pads, a breathing barrier for CPR, medical tape, gloves, even a small pair of scissors.
Can't forget those scissors, gotta make the cut, so to speak.
Right. You never know when you'll need to snip some gauze, maybe remove clothing to get to a wound, or even just open a tough package of those antiseptic wipes.
It's all about being ready, right? When those unexpected things happen and you have to think on your feet. So, as we're wrapping up this deep dive into the world of first aid, what's like the big takeaway? What do you really want our listeners to remember?
For me, it all comes back to that idea: knowledge is power. And in this case, it's the power to act, to potentially save a life. You don't have to be a medical professional to make a difference. Even just knowing the basics of first aid and feeling confident enough to use them, that can make all the difference.
It's about being that person who steps up, who knows what to do and does it, without freezing up. And hey, maybe this deep dive got you thinking. Maybe you want to learn even more about first aid. There's so much out there. You could take a CPR class, look into wilderness first aid, even just refresh your memory with one of those first aid apps.
Exactly. It's a lifelong journey, this learning, and it can have such a huge impact, not just on your own life, but on your family, your community. It ripples outward.
So here's a thought to chew on as you go about your day. Knowing what we know now about how important it is to be prepared, what's one thing you can do today to feel more ready, more equipped to handle an emergency? Maybe you check that first aid kit, have a chat with your family about what to do, or even just sign up for a basic first aid course. Whatever it is, take that step. Be that difference maker. You never know when your knowledge and your quick thinking might change everything.